the most dangerous predator, always approaches in silence. It doesn't need to roar to be threatening. It doesn't need to put on a show to be noticed. It simply watches quietly, calmly, and strikes when everything is under control. Humans are no different. In this world, the most formidable person isn't the one who talks the most or reacts the loudest. It's the one who knows when not to say anything at all. Silence, when paired with self-control and inner strength, can create a pressure far greater than any spoken threat. You don't need to raise your voice to be heard. You don't need to argue to win. All you need is to remain steady and let the other person fall into the chaos they created for themselves. People expect you to react, to argue, to lose your temper. But when you do none of that, when you just stand still and observe, they start to feel uneasy. They lose control. That's why this video will show you why silence, when mastered properly, can become the most powerful weapon you have. A kind of presence that keeps your enemies on edge without you having to say a word. A kind of power that's quiet but never to be underestimated. 1. The power of non-reaction. Most people react instinctively. They lash out when insulted, rush to explain when attacked, or explode emotionally when provoked, because they believe that reacting affirms their position. But in truth, the more easily you're affected, the easier you are to control. The more you react emotionally, the more power you hand over to someone else. Strong people don't play that game. They don't respond to every jab or lower themselves to the level of those trying to provoke them. They understand that reacting isn't always a sign of resistance. Sometimes it's a form of surrender, disguised as anger. Because when you react exactly how the other person wants you to, you've walked straight into their trap. You've unintentionally revealed what hurts you, even if it's just through a diverted gaze, a rushed explanation, or an expression you couldn't hide fast enough. And that's what you need to stop starting today. Picture this. Someone tries to humiliate you in front of others. They're waiting for you to lose control, to argue back, to turn the moment into a scene. But instead, you don't respond. You stay calm. Your gaze stays steady. You say nothing. You show no emotion except quiet composure. In that very moment, the entire power dynamic shifts. You are no longer the target. You become a mirror reflecting the insecurity of the one trying to manipulate you. Because when you don't react, you force the other person to face their own emptiness. They want to drag you into the mud, but you don't step in. They want to see you break, but you remain standing. And that silence, it unsettles them more than any comeback ever could. Non-reaction doesn't mean avoidance. It's a deliberate choice, a way of saying, I don't need to lower myself to play your game. Those who are truly strong don't need to react to prove their worth. They master themselves, and that's what makes them untouchable. 2. When you stay silent, you make them fear what they can't predict. People feel safe when they can read others. They study your reactions, anticipate your behavior, and use that information to manipulate. But when you stay silent, when you don't respond the way they expect, you become an unknown. And uncertainty makes people uneasy. They don't know what you're thinking. They have no idea what you might do next. They can't track your emotional rhythm or predict where your boundaries lie. And when they can't predict you, they start to tread carefully. They slow down. They back off. Because human nature fears what it can't control. You don't need to threaten anyone. You don't need to assert your power. You don't even need to try to intimidate. All you have to do is stay calm like a stone wall that doesn't flinch when struck, and that alone will throw them off in their performance. They expect you to get angry, to explain yourself, to defend quickly and expose your weak spot. But when you do none of those things, when you stand like a silent rock in a storm of words, they're the ones who start doubting themselves. Your silence sends their mind into chaos. They begin writing their own story, overthinking, projecting, and suddenly feeling watched, judged, threatened, even though you haven't said a word. Because in a world where everyone's trying so hard to be heard, the one who doesn't need to speak becomes the one everyone pays attention to. And in that world, silence is not weakness, it's a quiet form of pressure, a kind of power. Instead of trying to win with words, you win with space, the space they can't read, can't decode, can't control. And in that space, fear is planted quietly but deeply. 3. Steady as stone, you don't ask for permission to exist. Some people walk into a room without saying a word, without showing off, without trying to appear important, yet somehow their presence slows the air down. It makes others pause before they speak. They don't draw attention through flashy appearances, nor do they dominate the space with loud energy. They simply exist, and they exist with quiet strength. It's not that they're cold, they're just unhurried. It's not that they want to be distant, they simply don't need to blend in to feel worthy. They're not seeking validation, nor do they shrink themselves to be accepted. And it's this calm, self-contained presence that makes others take notice, adjust themselves, and think twice before speaking or acting around them. You don't need to take up space with noise to make an impact. People who truly carry weight don't prove themselves through volume, clothing, or forced charisma. They don't ask for permission to exist, they simply are. And that alone creates a silent pull that's impossible to ignore. When you walk without forcing, when you speak less but speak with intent, when you don't try to be seen but still hold your presence, you're building a kind of aura that others are compelled to respect, even if they can't explain why. Others may disagree with you, they may not understand you, but they won't easily cross you, because you leave no openings for them to slip through. You don't let internal chaos become visible cracks. You don't bend to the emotional tides of the crowd. And in that way, you don't just exist, you shape the space you enter. True strength doesn't come from demanding the spotlight, it comes from making the whole room fall silent just because you walked in. No need to announce yourself, no need to prove anything. Just stand steady as stone. 4. Don't reveal too much, silence eyes armor. In a world where everyone wants to be seen, known, and heard, the one who keeps a part of themselves reserved is the safest of all, because everything you reveal can become a weapon in someone else's hands. Your emotions, your thoughts, your habits, your fears, your ambitions, all of it is data. And data, in the wrong hands, becomes manipulation. The more you talk, the more you expose. The more you explain, the more you lose the mystery, which is your most powerful shield. People don't always listen to understand, they listen to map your emotions. They take note of what rattles you, what excites you, what makes you react. And then they use those triggers to lead you into a game you never agreed to play. But when you know how to hold back, when you're selective about what you say and what you keep to yourself, you're not just protecting your inner world. You're also disorienting those who seek to control it. They can't read your thoughts, and they can't manipulate your emotions because you never gave them access to the deeper layers. You don't need to lie. You don't need to be cold or distant. You just need to reveal only what's necessary. When asked, give short answers. When attacked, smile. When questioned, stay silent. And that silence becomes a declaration in itself. I don't owe you an explanation because no one has the right to define me. Some will say you're arrogant, some will think you're hard to reach. But the truth is, they fear what they can't figure out. They can't drag you into their mind games because you refuse to play. They can't find your weak spot because you never show it. And when you're that composed, you don't need steel armor, your discretion becomes your strongest shield. In a world where everyone is exposing themselves for approval, the one who keeps their inner world as sacred ground becomes the one others fear the most. 5. Silent action when you don't warn, you can't be stopped. There's a common mistake many people make. They talk too much about what they're going to do before they actually do it. They announce their plans, share their goals, proclaim their transformations as if simply saying it out loud is half the job done. But in reality, Every time you reveal your next move, you give others the chance to delay you, or worse, to doubt you, slow you down, or plant seeds of self-doubt in your mind. People who are truly effective don't broadcast. They don't need to declare what's coming, nor do they wait for applause at every step. They act in silence and let results speak for themselves. While others are still talking about what they will do, you've already done it quietly, and that's your advantage. Because when you don't signal your moves, you don't create resistance. No one stands in your way if they don't even see which way you're going. No envy, no sabotage, no gossip, because they don't know what you're building, where you're heading, or who you're becoming. Silent action not only protects your energy, it creates a reverse pressure. It catches people off guard with a sudden impact they never saw coming. And in an age where everyone is busy trying to be seen, the one who chooses to move quietly is the one who controls the board. You don't need to give warnings. You don't need to make promises. You don't need to let them know what's next. Just walk quietly, work in the dark, and let your results arrive like a thunderclap with no forecast. Because by the time they realize who you are, you'll already be at a level too far above for them to reach. Not because you tried to outdo them, but because you didn't waste time trying to prove anything. And that is why the one who moves in silence is always the one who shocks the world. 6. Never apologize for being yourself. The truth doesn't need permission. In a world built on consensus and the constant hunger for approval, people learn to adjust themselves. They smile when they're not happy, nod when they don't agree, and suppress who they really are just to keep the peace. They trade inner truth for outer comfort and slowly forget what it feels like to live as their true self. But there's another kind of person. They don't try to fit in, and they don't try to stand out. They don't shape their words just to be liked. They don't change their views just to avoid conflict. Wherever they go, they carry the same presence, not to prove anything, but because they refuse to trade their authenticity for acceptance. You don't need to become a watered-down version of yourself to earn respect. Genuine truth, when held with calm confidence, creates its own gravity. It doesn't need to argue. It doesn't need to rebel. It just needs to exist, and its very existence makes those wearing masks feel uncomfortable. Not because you're trying to make them feel small, but because your presence reminds them of what they once gave up: conviction, values, integrity. And sometimes, simply not being like them is enough to become a mirror they'd rather not face. Of course, they'll try to label you arrogant, difficult, rigid. But you don't need to explain yourself. You don't need to prove them wrong. Because those who truly understand the value of integrity will never need an explanation. And those who don't know amount of talking will change their mind. So live at your own rhythm. Hold your boundaries. Say no when it matters. Stay silent when there's no point in arguing. And walk away from anything that demands you betray yourself just to stay. Don't apologize for being real as long as you hold your truth with dignity and never use it to belittle others. Because in a world where everyone is trying to please the crowd, the one who refuses to change to be accepted is the one the crowd quietly respects and secretly fears. 7. Silence is the deepest strike. You don't have to shout to be heard. You don't have to fight back to reclaim your worth. And you certainly don't need to prove you're right just because someone is trying to shake your confidence. When you can stay silent while being attacked, stay grounded while being misunderstood, and stay calm while being tested, you're not just mastering yourself, you're forcing others to confront themselves. No one can truly hurt you if they can't touch your inner world. No one can manipulate you if you don't expose your vulnerabilities. And no one can defeat you if you refuse to step into the fight they're hoping for. Silence, when forged through discipline, awareness, and self-control, is no longer avoidance. It becomes a form of power. It keeps others guessing. It creates uncertainty. It makes people hesitate. because the unpredictable is what humans fear the most. You don't need to be understood. You don't need agreement. You don't need to stand on someone else's stage waiting for their applause. You just need to stand firm in your own space, silent but sharp, calm but untouchable. And when you truly become that kind of person, the one who doesn't speak yet commands respect, the one who doesn't fight yet causes others to retreat, you no longer need to fight at all. Because when you don't react, don't waver, and refuse to be pulled into chaos, you're not just surviving the storm. You become the one the storm can't touch.